What up, YouTube? This is Steven, and welcome back to another video. In this video, I want to review, analyze, and critique the book Chicana Falsa and Other Stories of Death, Identity, and Oxnard by Michele Serros. And I ran across this book because I was looking for Chicano literature to read, and I ran across this book, and the title sort of captured my attention. I was like, wonder what that's about. But I wound up doing a little research and watching a video on YouTube, and she kind of explained the title a bit more, and it was like, basically, like, she felt like when she released this book, people were going to call her a Chicana Falsa because she's not maybe writing about typical themes to write about in regards to Mexican American literature. As well, she doesn't speak Spanish fluently or as well as she should, according to some people. And basically, I think that she just wanted to beat them to the punch. Hey, I just call myself a Chicana Falsa. Right. Alright, so I read the book. The book's pretty short and straight to the point. I enjoyed the book. The stories, it's like a combination of short stories and poems. And the stories, well, I'll say that the stories and poems don't seem to quite have a overall connection with each other than I just really think this is more like just random stories of her life, versus like a theme or a collection of stories falling into a theme of some sort. It's again, it's more so just a random collection of stories and poems, and it's more so prose than poems, I think. But I guess prose can be considered poetry, perhaps. But overall, I enjoy reading it. The book is, pretty short and straight to the point. The edition of the book that I have has, more or less 79 pages worth of material. She gives her acknowledgments in the front of the book, and she gives the introduction as well, where she talks about, kind of like her mother and the death of her mother, and also kind of just giving insights on her life, more or less, and her life in regards to being a Chicana. I would say some standout stories in this book, standout poems and stories in this book. One for me was I'll say Attention Shoppers. I think that was excuse me. That was a weird, funny story. Basically, it just involves Michelle and her friend in the grocery store, and they're looking at mixed vegetables, and they notice that the vegetables all have certain names, like, oh, this is like Italian mixed vegetables, or this is Malibu mixed vegetables, or this Mexican mixed vegetables. And her friend having some animosity towards that, and it goes into a whole spiel about kind of like in terms of like identity and barriers of the identity and things like that. I thought that was pretty interesting, and I'm wondering, like, is this an actual true story? Did this actually happen? Another story or poem. Well, another poem that speaks out or sticks out. I would say Mi Problema or Mi Problema. Lo siento. I say that because Michelle sort of speaks about her experiences of being a fourth generation Mexican American, and how kind of like people has certain expectations of her, and how, like, she doesn't speak Spanish as a first language. She speaks it as a second language, and how she kind of feels like she's getting kind of like judgment from the community because of that. And also, she does mention like how kind of like if this was a white person, they get kind of like encouragement if they were speaking like her. But since it's her, she gets kind of like discouragement, like, oh, like, you don't know how to speak Spanish. Versus the white person who did it was like, oh, oh, this person wants to speak Spanish. And basically just her experience with identity in regards to culture and language, and how I guess language does sort of help forge an identity, and define an identity. Um, Another story was like her sister was on The Price of Right, well, The Price is Right show, um, and that experience, and that was an interesting story. A really interesting story that sticks out to me is Shower Power Hippie Man. Um, it's like her and her friends wind up going to this other neighborhood, and they see this man taking a shower, and they're watching him. Yeah, that story's hilarious. I guess it's sort of like a coming of age story, so to speak. And let's see, there were a lot more stories that stuck out to me. You know, but I would say the very last story sticks out to me too. The very last story is probably more so, kind of like more on a serious note, and it's about her mother, and her mother buying her Michelle a desk so that she could write stories on. And it sort of seemed like, it's sort of like a symbol of her mother really taking her seriously as a writer and having faith in her and wanting to sort of invest in her in some way. So I thought that was sweet. And Michelle also kind of agonizing over not being able to write a story, or write the great American novel that she wanted to write. Um, and at one point, the desk wind up just like her mother had to pay for the desk on installments, and she had to work extra, like work outside of the home to pay for it. And she also had to sacrifice some things of her own in order to pay for it too. And also, Michelle feeling sort of guilty that she hasn't been able to come up with anything that, was, that she felt was of substance. So it was, Michelle kind of like, well, I guess my brother may have wasted her money, wasted her time and effort. So, yeah. And I say, this book is worth a read. It's worth, your time. It's not, you don't have to get in, invest like a whole week into reading it. It's not like some super thick book. It's really thin. It's like 79 pages. It's interesting. It does kind of like give more insight into maybe Michele Serros, like herself, but also it doesn't get too deep into like, the stereotypical, like, kind of like, oh, my family is illegal immigrants, or like, oh, my family, or people in my family are migrant workers or day labor. It doesn't get into like that sort of a thing. It's a bit more just like more so stories of herself or about herself, but also it does speak a little bit on kind of like identity, if you will, Mexican American identity. Another story that I want to mention, one more that did kind of stick out was a poem. It was Planned Parenthood, age 16. So I'm like, I read the poem and I was like, wow. So I was like, was this her experience? or was this her writing about someone else's experience? Because based on how she wrote it, it seems like it's her experience, but it's basically her experience with going to Planned Parenthood. So, so wow, like, oh wow, you know. Um, but overall, it's worth a read. I think it's a pretty entertaining book. Pretty short, straight to the point. So again, a lot of people don't like to read certain books because they may seem too long, and then at one point it's like, well, this is a long book and it doesn't seem interesting. But I will say that this book, is short and straight to the point, and the stories and poems are short too. So you can just kind of pace yourself as you wish. Um, and I will say, I kind of, it's sort of sad that the author died at a relatively young age. She died at 48 years old due to cancer, unfortunately. She wound up getting treatment, but I think that something happened with the treatment and it didn't work, unfortunately. So, unfortunately, the author is no longer with us. Um, and from the interviews I saw, she seems like a pretty decent, a nice person, pretty interesting, you know. So that's kind of a downer. I kind of wish she was still here, um, you know, writing more, I think she wrote a total of 4 books. Chicana Falsa was the first book. The second book was How to Be a Chicana Role Model. And the third book was Honey Blonde Chica. And the fourth book was Scandalosa. So, yeah. And this is my first book of hers that I read. I think I may end up reading her other 3 books. I probably will end up reading her other 3 books. More than likely at one point or another. I will say am really interested to see and read the book Chicana Role Model, or How to Be a Chicana Role Model. Definitely. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of like give my 2 cents and show my kind of like support to the author and the literary community in general, and just do a little quick video about this book and a quick shout out. And also, I was like looking for a book on kind of like the. I will say that this book is not totally about like the Chicano experience, which isn't a bad thing, Um, but if you're looking for that, this may not be the best book. But if you're looking for a book written by a Chicano, or Chicana in this case, who wants to just hear a story, you hear some interesting stories and a little bit of issues on identity, then I think this is a good book to pick up. Well, I think I said all I have to say for the time being, so thanks a lot for watching, you guys. Feel free to comment, feel free to subscribe, feel free to give me a thumbs up. Your feedback and support are extremely appreciated and extremely valued. Until the next video, adios and goodbye for now. Also, one more thing I want to mention. I think there's actually like a CD version of this book that she performed herself, and she did it for like the poems and short stories in this book. So hey, I think you can find them on Amazon.com and also YouTube too. At least some of them, if you're interested. So yeah, there you go. All right. Thanks a lot for watching.